Welcome to It's Not About Us with Elaine Beck. I'm Jared Cummings, filling in for Elaine tonight, and we are joined by Chad Nedohin. It's a name you need to know. He's a rising star in the Canadian freedom movement, and he's a worship pastor and church planner and co-founder of #DWAC, the SEC, as well as host of the podcast Dwacked, which you can listen to or watch on Rumble. So Chad, so great to have you tonight.
It's awesome to be here, man. I love being with you guys here.
So let's start with the top story, which is #DWAC the SEC, which is what brings you to DC. For folks who don't know, what is it?
So DWAC, the SEC, is a play on words for the SPAC, DWAC, which is funding TMTG, which is the parent company of Truth Social, and we all love Truth Social, right? Truth Social is free speech where Twitter and Facebook aren't. So what we did when we're shareholders, and we are fighting this nasty situation where the SEC is blocking the merger between TMTG and DWAC, preventing the social media platform from growing, putting out streaming platforms, and killing the investors. Investors are getting destroyed, both the owners of DWAC and the individual retail shareholders. So we sat around one night with the team we created, and we just threw out hashtags till we got something that stuck. And one of our guys said, well, you're on your show, Chad, you already say you've been DWAC'd. And he said, why don't we just take that and run with it? DWAC the SEC. So we did that. So we formed this group, and what we are is we're an activist group of shareholders. Okay? And so we had to organize because we were being disenfranchised. Most people are down 80%, 90%, and they're hurt. And there's single moms in here. And it's almost all first-time investors. It's 95% retail shareholders, 75% under 100 shares. So it's all just small people with a little bit of money that go on it.
And is that typical for most investments, that we have that many retail shareholders?
Completely record-breaking. The word I've been told is historic in terms of any public stock in the history of the United States or the world for that matter.
Very good. So we've just thrown out a ton of terms. We might need to backtrack a little bit.
All right,
So what is DWAC, and then what is the SEC?
So DWAC stands for Digital World Acquisition Corporation. They fly under the ticker on the stock market, DWAC, or DWAC or DWAC, depending on how you say it. Some guys like to say DWAC. And then, of course, when I started the show, it was you've been DWAC'd. And then the little hammer slams down, right?
Very good, very good. And then what's the SEC's role in all of this?
So the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, they were formed in the 30s to protect people from 20s and 30s. They were formed to protect people from predatory companies. So you could have these companies lying about their stock, lying about their company,
lying about their earnings, returns,
that's right.
and
all
then
that. People would invest and they'd lose money, and so they were formed to protect people from that. And so they're supposed to be protecting shareholders, but in this situation they've done nothing but harm shareholders. It's been absolutely terrible.
And so let's unpack that. How are shareholders being harmed? You've talked about, they're supposed to, when a merger comes up, have a certain number of days to review the information and then approve or disapprove?
Yeah, so in this scenario, the company DWAC would have the opportunity to file their business combination form in S4. And then the process in administrative law dictates that it would typically be a 30-day turnaround. And because the SEC has even responded to people and said, we can't block the merger, they can't block it. So what they've done is they've just taken the paperwork, shoved it under the coffee machine, and walked away from it. And they say, and every time anybody inquires, they go, investigation going on. Well, how long does it take 15 months to look into a handful of documents?
I mean, it's only supposed to take 30 days, right?
That's right. And even with an investigation going on, the legal precedent is that they still have to process the paperwork. Corporate finance, who deals with the paperwork, they're just a paper machine, is still supposed to keep moving it forward, and enforcement, if something was found, would still just issue a fine. And there'd be some resubmittals and things. And once it moves forward, we vote, we combine, and then the capital from within Digital World Acquisition goes into Trump Media and Technology Group, and they can invest some of it in Truth. They can do a streaming platform where they can host shows and media companies like this.
So let's talk a little bit more about what a merger would mean. So TMTG and DWAC come together. What's that going to do for the conservative movement?
Well, so there's some political advisors who've suggested to me recently that right now Truth Social has about 5 million users, active users. That would go to 25 or 50 million, and it would have been there before the midterms. And they said that alone would have resulted in potentially 10 or 20 more seats in the House, and 3 or 4 of those Senate seats, those that were razor thin and flip Dem, would have gone Republican.
Wow.
And it's really the interaction. I mean, I've got a Facebook account with 3,000 followers. I've got a Truth Social account with 2,800 followers. I can put the same post up. 1 like on Facebook, 500 likes on Truth.
Wow. So that kind of shows the power of what this merger could mean for the movement, which also might ascribe a motive to what is happening with the SEC, putting the paperwork under the coffee table. So who at the SEC is ignoring the paperwork?
So what we know as shareholders is that there are 2 primary people at the SEC who have a hate on for us. And that would be Gary Gensler, who was Hillary Clinton's campaign finance officer.
Well, isn't that interesting?
It's always Hillary. It's like, oh, that guy got whacked. I guess it's Hillary. It's always Hillary. And then Melissa Hodgman, who is the head of enforcement at the SEC, and her husband is Peter Strzok.
No way.
Oh, just happens.
Struck by lightning, it all goes back to Peter. That's crazy.
So we heard something recently that prior to the Biden administration, investigations at the SEC were the way they were supposed to be, which is they have to start with a shareholder or a complaint, and from the bottom up, the agent who takes that complaint starts and opens everything. Since the Biden administration has taken over, all investigations have started from the top down, where somebody like Gensler or Hodgman says, we want this company targeted, and they go after them.
Wow. So it's almost like a flashback to the IRS with Lois Lerner, where they're targeting conservatives.
That came up today in our meetings that we've been having with Congress. It came up yesterday.
So who all have you met with while you've been in D.C.?
So let me go through the list. We started off, we hit up Bishop. We got to J.D. Vance. We also got to Cornyn. And then we headed off. We split up because we had lots of them. We went to Boebert, Posey, and then to... why am I blanking on this? To Chip Roy's office. And then today was a little bit different, where it wasn't just meeting with them. It was with chief counsels from the committees. So we were with O&I, we were with the Judiciary Committee, and then there were representatives from capital markets and financial services as well.
And what are you hoping is going to come out of this trip to D.C.?
Well, public pressure. And if you've been watching the news, the last 2 days, TMTG has been here. Devin's here in D.C. today, too. He was meeting with Jim Jordan. And we know that the DWAC board has been doing things as well. So all 3 groups are putting immense pressure on the House and Senate to get investigations opened. And potentially we're hoping that the pressure alone, without an actual legal action, will just result in them moving the S4 forward, which would move us to the vote. Once the vote is done, the merger happens, the money changes hands. The shareholders probably get most or all or even more of their value back, and TMTG gets to build this movement the way they wanted to.
So for somebody who is invested or maybe isn't invested but is a supporter of Truth Social, how can they help in this endeavor?
So the best thing you can do is you can call your rep. Call your rep, call your senators, email them, and we actually have a white letter circulating social media and on our website, dwacthesec.com, and you can take those and you can use those as a way to communicate with your elected representatives and say, we want this through. And to date, we've had thousands of letters, and as they pile on, every bag full of letters they get, it's okay, we have to do something about this. And meeting with them, giving them the stories. We've had some of the shareholders were here telling their stories, and it really hit home, and we just need to keep that pressure. Because they've got a lot on their plates, right? I don't know if you've noticed, but it's been a pretty busy week in D.C.
Definitely.
And so if we don't, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, is what one of my favorite social media OGs likes to say. So,
so you mentioned hitting home, but home for you is not in the United States. It's back in Alberta. So why is a Canadian involved in this fight?
I get that question a lot. And the biggest reason is this. It's that, well, so one, I'm in Canada, which is further along the transition to communism than maybe other countries. And I've seen it. It's terrible. We have no free speech there. And you look at what we had to do with the trucking convoy, which those are all my friends. I wasn't there. I was busy in the political system working to throw out a WEF premier. But so I got invested in the shares, but I believe in free speech. I really, really believe in free speech, and I don't want to see this go down. We need this. Canadians need Truth Social too, right? Like, we need it badly. I was helping out with an election.
Do Canadians have free speech right now? We've seen with what's going on with Jordan Peterson and whatnot, and the gender confusion and everything.
And what's really interesting about that, so Trudeau just last week made an agreement with Google that anybody he gives them on the list that he doesn't want to have show up in the search results or limit their search results
Oh my gosh.
gets bumped. So there's a bunch of news articles out there that hit art pieces on me because of DWAC and some political stuff I've done. Then I have my music. I'm a worship leader, and I have a few songs on the radio across Canada and some YouTube videos. And I just thought I'd check, and sure enough, half the search results about me just disappeared, just gone. After the day Trudeau made the agreement with Google, he can do anything he wants. He can tell Twitter to ban these people. What they did what the FBI and did with Twitter here, Trudeau legally gets to do in Canada.
Oh my gosh. Now, why is that?
Because we don't have a constitution. I'll say this, Americans value their freedom because you guys fought for it and you bled for it. Canadians, we were just handed our freedom from the Queen, but was it real freedom? It still came with handcuffs. Was our constitution absolute? Absolutely not, right? The sister church to the church I was attending throughout COVID was staying open as well. We were wide open. We were leading worship on the stage under the threat of, being grabbed by the police, and we didn't get picked. But our sister church did. And when they went to court to argue, the justice actually said, please don't make any arguments based on the Constitution, because you know that Constitution, I can suspend it whenever I want.
They can suspend whenever they want.
Whenever they want. And so we have no free speech. We have no absolute constitutional rights. And so for us, we know what it's like to be squashed. And so for this Canadian, I'm here to fight. And I'm not going to watch. I mean, I'm invested too. There's obviously a financial component. And I don't give up. You attack, I'm going on the attack right back.
So you mentioned worship leader. How does a worship leader get involved in politics?
Well, it's like this. The first thing I did when the COVID lockdown started coming is I spent a lot of time in prayer, and the Holy Spirit came on me and showed me this plan to go out to our provincial legislature and lead worship out front. Take my guitar, no PA, nothing, and no political focus. Focus on him and him alone, give him all my attention. So we went out there and people just started showing up. And it became a social media thing. We were able to form private Facebook groups where they couldn't censor. And by word of mouth and through phone calls and texts, build a group. And people started coming out. And the Lord had impressed me seven Saturdays. Go out there and worship and pray. And on the seventh one, we wanted to go big because the Lord was impressing us, but we had no way. We get this phone call. It said, hey, you want our stage? And so we get this stage, but the next morning, it's minus 25 Celsius. It's a foot of snow and 25 kilometer an hour winds. And we're like, Lord, you sent us out there? So we went out, and we've got radiant heaters pointed at me. I've got fingerless gloves with hot packs in them, and my fingers are freezing to the guitar strings. And we're leading worship, and I'm going, Lord, why? And he's like, just watch. There was a reason. And there were supposed to be a bunch of other groups using that stage as well, and they were too scared to come out in the cold. So they didn't come, so we got the stage to ourselves. And there was 500 people showed up in that weather to worship for 45 minutes in the snow. And then I was able to give a message that the Lord had for me to give to them because the stage was free. And by the end of it, there was a mix of a crowd of about 250 Christians, 250 non-believers. And they were all shouting the name of Jesus at the top of their lungs. And that very minute, one of my friends who's also in politics was getting the 23rd signature that we needed to start the leadership review process to take out our WEF premier. And from there, people started pulling me into politics because they saw what I was doing. Now, I don't like to fanboy, but Sean Foyt is really one of the few people that I would actually fanboy for. He's so amazing. And so we watched what he did, and that's the kind of thing here. And so then from there, I moved into more of a political role, helping sign up people for what you guys would be more of a primary process, a leadership review. And so I would go and lead worship secretly during these lockdowns to churches and little halls that the police weren't watching. And we'd sign everybody up to go and vote at the leadership review. And once the group that was all doing that, there was about 50 core leaders. I wasn't the leader of that group, but I used the skills that the Lord gave me. And by the end of it, we had 25,000 people, and he only needed about 2,000 or 1,000 to beat them, depending on which conference they vote at. And we just dropped it on the news. Sorry, we got everybody to throw you out, and we eventually did.
Very good. Well, Chad, how can people follow you? How can they find you? How can they get involved?
Truth Social. I mean, if you want to find me, my name is Chad Nedohin, and I'm on Truth under that name. So follow me there. If you want to get involved, just watch the posts. I also have a show called DWACKed on Rumble, and we always end the show with, you've been DWACKed. And from there, we give updates. We show people what to do. It's become an activist show. we also have a lot of fun on the show, because if you're not having fun, I mean,
Yeah.
really. But we use the show as a way to say, here's what's happening, here's what you can do, here's an update, and then we follow up with people. We have guests on the show. And then the last one is we still have our Reddit group, which, please, Lord, once the merger goes through and they have groups, we want to be off of Reddit. But yeah, Truth Social is the way to find me.
Very good. Well, I have one final question for you, and that has to do with your upbringing and work as a worship leader to now being involved in politics both in Canada and the United States. To somebody who's maybe feeling that inspiration from the Holy Spirit that they need to speak up or get involved, what would you say to them?
I say do it, but pray first. Pray. Let the Lord show you what to do. Like, everything I've done, even starting DWAC Live, the Lord was on me for weeks and almost a month. It was like 3.5 weeks, like, to do this. And I was like, but Lord, I don't have time. He's like, you have the gear. You know how to do everything. Get on there and do it. And the Lord will, like, pray about it. The Lord will show you what to do. Listen. And from there, if you're following his leading, it doesn't mean you actually have to stop being a worship leader, right? You can be a worship leader, you can be a church planter, and you can a parent, a dad. You can do all of that and still get involved in politics. We all should be.
Yeah,
It's our future. It's kids' future.
that's a great message. Listen and obey. That obey part is the hard part, but it's critical.
It can be, and it's not always fun either. There's times even coming.
Negative 25 Celsius is pretty brutal.
It is, but you get used to it. Although I really enjoy this weather here in DC this week.
Yeah.
I'm not going to see this weather till May, and I'm like, wow, this is beautiful.
Well, Chad, it's been so great having you on the program.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And for those watching online, this has been an episode of It's Not About Us with Elaine Beck. I'm Jared Cummings filling in for Elaine tonight. Please visit proverbsmediagroup.com. That's proverbsmediagroup.com to catch this and all of our future episodes. Thank you.